everyone. Dylan from the Smart Economy podcast. We have the last interview of Permissionless on day 2.
Best for last.
Saved the best for last.
Exactly.
We have Hadley Stern, the Chief Commercial Officer at Marinade. How are you doing today, Hadley?
I'm doing fantastic. Great to be with you here. It's been a great conference so far. Just finished a couple of panels and feeling very energized.
Can't wait to talk about the panels, but you just kind of gave me a little bit of your story, and I think our listeners would love to hear what's your genesis into crypto. And maybe even before you kind of talk about how you were voluntold, did you even stumble on Bitcoin before?
Yeah.
And what was your aha moment?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I was of course aware of Bitcoin from probably 2011, 12 on, but I didn't get it. I didn't go deep into it, and I didn't really get it until I was forced to spend a lot of time looking at it. So just to be completely honest. But then once I did, there was probably a couple of months of, what is this? This is weird. This doesn't really make, And then there was okay, this is really, really interesting. I think the mining piece, going deep into that and understanding how it worked was the first peeling of the onion of this is not like anything that's ever been done before. Using compute in a decentralized way, and building in economics into it, it's just, how can you not be fascinated by it? And that's basically what happened.
All right, so you just talked about the mining piece. I think we've done a huge disservice to how you got to the mining piece.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your professional career into the blockchain space and how you kind of progressed, starting with your time at Fidelity.
Yeah, and I get this question a lot because I am a bit of an odd one. I studied at RISD, so I studied graphic design, and graduated in the late 90s into that. And that was just at the emergence of the web. And so when I then shifted to web design and then shifted to product management. And so that was kind of my evolution. And a lot of my career was spent in good old product management, which I think is a great generalist kind of way to be able to learn about many different things. And yes, in 2013, at the end of the year, at that time, I was managing the product management development design teams at Fidelity Labs, which is an internal innovation team. Had a conversation with my boss and said, if anything interesting comes up, I'd kind of like to focus on one thing. And that's where this word voluntold comes up, where I was basically 2014, careful what you wish for. We want you to start the Bitcoin incubator for Fidelity because we think there's something really strategic and interesting. So I had the privilege of working with people smarter than me across many different disciplines, technology, business, finance, and we formed a very early team, and we basically looked at the technology, how it worked at Fidelity and all the various businesses and what the opportunities were. That led us to do some interesting things early on. One thing we decided, well, actually two things that were critical to how Fidelity has evolved is, one is custody is absolutely critical. Mm-hmm. This solution set does not work without trusted custody. So that led to the strategic decision to start Fidelity Digital Asset Services, which I helped start, was the founding president. And then the other strategic piece was that we can't meaningfully participate in Bitcoin unless we're also mining, because you have to support the network, understand it, and that led to some early mining experiments that people after me took and scaled. So that's my evolution story. I owe a tremendous amount to Fidelity, and it's amazing to see now all the different things that they do. But now I'm on the staking side, which is another conversation.
Yeah, but you also have some really interesting stops in between the two. So after you left Fidelity, maybe just walk us through the rest of your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, so LinkedIn. One of my favorite tweets, by the way, is someone tweeted out, someone should let everyone on LinkedIn know that we all die.
I saw that today.
But after I left Fidelity after 18 years, 4 years, the last 4 in crypto, really I wanted to join the startup world and the DeFi world specifically. So I left to join Block, BLOQ, which is Jeff Garzik, who's was number 3 core developer on Bitcoin, and Matt Rozak's blockchain infrastructure shop, and I was COO there. There I got to see a whole other side of the industry. This is just right around Ethereum launching, before the ICO craze, and so helped them build blockchain node infrastructure for institutions, and then ended up leaving to go back to help Bank of New York Mellon build their digital asset custody business. So And now I'm with Marinade, so I'm back to really the DeFi side. And that was actually a purposeful decision. I do think, really in many ways with the exception of Fidelity, that my gut tells me that the product development and innovation is going to come bottoms up. It's going to come from DeFi companies and DeFi entities going up the stack from a regulatory security compliance standpoint versus institutions coming down to blockchain. So very excited to be with Marinade, which is a leading staking solution provider for Solana. Very interesting in that Marinade doesn't run any validators. When you stake with Marinade instead, it's distributed, that SOL is distributed kind of automatically to hundreds of validators in real time. And the validator selection is based on validator uptime, security, and also rewards. So it's an interesting kind of market in and of itself. And I'm specifically helping them bring this product to institutions, US institutions, in a way that makes sense.
Very cool, Hadley. I think when I first got into the crypto and blockchain space, 2017-ish, the major narrative was the institutions are coming, the institutions are coming. They didn't come until recently, but if you look at it from the perspective of an iceberg, 10% of the iceberg is above water, 90% is below water.
Yeah.
Institutions don't just show up magically overnight. It takes them years and years and years to kind of grind through the process. So what is it like from the inside, and having also built node infrastructure for institutions to adopt, what's like the process like on the inside? Why does it take so long? And maybe how do we curb and temper people's expectations when they just see a BlackRock ETF now and they're assuming billions and trillions of dollars are going to flow in when it still might take years? Why is that, and like what does it look like from the inside for them?
Analogy I like to use in this example is Uber and taxis. Like to me, TradFi are the taxis and DeFi's Uber. And if you look at how Uber, what they did, they basically did some illegal, can I swear? They basically did some illegal shit for a few years and just kind of skirted the regulatory, had a few lawsuits, pissed a few people off, but they did it. You can't do that with money.
Right.
So I think part of the tension that you're seeing and why it's taking longer is that dynamic. And what is the principal driver of that dynamic? Regulation. So finance operates in an incredibly regulated space. You can't just go home and say, you know what, I'm going to spin up a money services business in addition to my podcast and start lending people money. You can't do that.
Right.
So because of the regulatory weight, that is one of the principal drivers that you're seeing in the slowness of TradFi adoption. I am optimistic, regardless of the election outcome, that we're getting there and that will change. The second thing that people need to understand, and this comes down to money, is there's like two things in life you can't screw up for people. It's their email and their bank account, right? You can't screw up money. Like you just can't. And that's why there's so much regulation. And so the security layer, the compliance layer of running a true money business, whether it's securities or banking, etc., means that it's very hard. You can't just do that. So I guess another way of saying the institutional TradFi space that we're looking to help change, it's just really, really hard. So it's just going to take time.
So when you left initially the institutional space, you went to go help build Ethereum node validator infrastructure for institutions. You went back into the institutional space, and now you've reemerged back into Web3, but you landed in Solana. What was it about the Solana ecosystem that you found particularly attractive, and why did you want to jump into there?
Great question, because when I did my due diligence on joining Marinade, it was as much doing it on Solana as it was Marinade. I kind of described this job as like a Russian doll, or a niche within a niche within a niche. I knew about Solana. I got involved in Ethereum pretty early. Not enough, obviously, but I did. So I've always had an emotional attraction to Ethereum. It was also kind of a more touchy-feely kind of protocol after the hardness of Bitcoin. And yes, it's been amazing to see the growth of Ethereum, but like many users trying to do, whether it was NFTs or I want to clear out this last $30 worth of ETH in my wallet and the gas fee's $300. You know what's going on there. So in doing due diligence on Solana, first of all, my introduction to Marinade came through the Solana Foundation. And that, I think, is a linchpin of Solana's success. I think they've struck this balance of being paternal, but not paternalistic. And, pushing the ecosystem along, but also stepping back. Versus you have other protocols like Ethereum where I think it's just kind of hands off, and other protocols that have maybe been too centralized and too directional. And Solana has adoption. I mean, it's just the numbers.
Yeah.
I think they announced at Breakpoint that the Solana SVM cleared, the top 4 Ethereum, L1 and L2s in total. So it was kind of an easy answer when I got to it. You're starting to see, there were some institution announcements with Societe Generale and I believe Franklin Templeton. So I'm very bullish on institutional products being built on Solana, which leads me to be very bullish for Marinade, because Marinade, we not only give the best rewards to users compared to other staking providers, we also help decentralize the Solana network. So I think it's a virtuous circle.
Yeah, I interviewed Austin Federa from the Solana Foundation on the pod last September, and it was just before Breakpoint 2. And what really kind of blew my mind open was that Solana is the first chain that's leapfrogging the previous chain for new developers who are coming into Web3. So in 2016, you had people building on Ethereum who just skipped building on Bitcoin. And now in 2023, you have people building on Solana that skipped building on Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really starting to grab that new mind share from Web2 traditional developers that are going into the ecosystem. So now I'm really curious to hear about how you specifically ended up at a staking protocol, because you mentioned that you believe Marinade is going to help decentralize the staking in the Solana ecosystem. But I did see a really interesting tweet on Marinade's Twitter thread earlier today that 93% of all the souls staked in Solana are natively staked.
So I could have paid you to ask that question, but I didn't. Or you're just very kind. So about 9 months ago, Marinade had a realization that the LST space, that it makes sense in some use cases for Solana, but in many ways it doesn't. You don't have the 32 ETH-like minimum. You don't have the crazy gas fees. So LST makes sense if you want to use the token for other DeFi activities, but native staking makes sense. So Marinade released native staking about 6 months ago. No smart contract risk. The assets that you custody agnostic, so it could be yourself, could be through one of the custody providers we recently integrated with Zodian Copper. And the beauty is that if something ever happened to Marinade, your soul is safe. So we use the delegate authority in Solana to do that. That statistic is the reason why we launched that. It also happens to be institutional friendly, right? No token.
Right.
Custody agnostic, funds are safe. So that's one of the strategic reasons that Marinade had shifted into the native space.
And so can you kind of give me a little bit of a perspective for, there's 50 plus liquid staking tokens in the Solana ecosystem. So where has Marinade kind of crawled up into that list? Is it top 10, top 5, top 3?
I'd have to get you the numbers. I think it was the first, which doesn't necessarily mean the biggest in life, but it was the first, if not one of the first. I think the TVL right now is give or take 1.25 billion. I think Jito is something like just under 2. And so that's, and then there's a long tail of others, and it's obviously a very competitive space.
Yes.
We're going to continue to be focused on that space and on product innovations, including we just launched a stake auction marketplace. So I mentioned those number of validators, right?
Yeah.
And so a few months ago, we launched this innovation where validators now bid for the right for that stake with some of their MEV and some of their fees. There's kind of a mismatch in the market right now. Some validators are doing quite well, as they should, but there's an opportunity to pass some of that on to the end staker. So that's something we've introduced. So the LST piece doesn't go away, but again, we're very bullish on the native staking side. It makes sense for the network.
100%. So if you had to put on your speculation hat, where do you think is going to be a killer use case for LSTs in Solana and or just in general across the broader blockchain space? And I ask this because we have eigenlayer and things like restaking that are really starting to take a narrative hold. So how does AVSs and restaking solutions compete with liquid staking solutions?
Very good question. I will here not provide an expert opinion, but just an opinion. And that is, first of all, there's a Solana question there, right?
Yes.
With the role of L2s, yes or no, especially with Firedancer. Like, what are we talking about here? So I think that story has to emerge, and we have to conclude that. And then maybe there's a role for bridging across other blockchain networks with an AVS. I'm not sure. So I think it's too soon to say. It's very interesting to watch.
Right.
That I will say, and we are engaged with some of those companies doing some work there to really understand it. How it affects the LST, I'm not sure. I think it's too early to say.
It's way too early. Eigenlayer just launched this year.
Yeah. And I participate in that, but I don't really know what what is it? Like, I have this thing in my wallet. It's not clear where it came from. It's not clear what it's worth. Well, I think nothing. And it's not clear how it's growing. So it's, to me, the funny thing I find about layer 2, this gets back to the Russian doll thing. This is like even for us who've been in crypto a long time, you really have to sit down to really understand layer 2. It's kind of like back to the original Bitcoin mining where you're like, what the hell is this? At least for me. Maybe other people learn more quickly, but I think we're going to have a challenge as an industry because it can sound a little questionable in terms of what is the value you're really creating? Is this a product for a product's sake? I'm not saying it is. I don't know enough to say.
At first glance, it can scare people like the credit default swaps did in 2007 and earlier. So there's definitely a role for us to be concerned, but not concerned, just skeptical or question. But I think that should be the due diligence of every participant in blockchain and crypto networks. So I was just curious to hear your insights, and I do think it's a hurry up and wait sort of situation to see how these two interact and what the competition looks like. But you are here, you spoke on multiple panels, had multiple discussions. So what was kind of the focus of your conversations here at Permissionless?
Yeah.
And maybe what were some of the details that you were digging into on the panels that you participated on?
Yeah, so I participated in a small panel with Ben Sprango from the Solana Foundation as part of Founders Day. Surprise, surprise, the topic was, how to work with institutions. And so I was providing some of my experience from the buyer side from Fidelity Bank and New York Mellon of how institutions think about interacting with DeFi companies and protocols. So as you would expect, it was a lot of conversation, regulation, security, and then the product itself. So that was a really great discussion, and got to meet some other portfolio companies, not portfolio companies, but other startups in the Solana ecosystem that are building some interesting product. And then I moderated a panel on institutional DeFi with Ripple, CoinFund, and Mantra. And so that was a really interesting conversation to hear the different perspectives on, we tried to at first do something which sounds like it should be easy, which is define DeFi. So for example, Fidelity is the 4th or 5th largest holder of Bitcoin in the world now with the Bitcoin ETF. But is that DeFi? I'm not sure. So we went through that, and then we went through an exercise to define CeFi, and then had a conversation around, where we are in this life cycle. I will say that we closed off with, me asking people's view 12 to 18 months, and everyone was broadly very optimistic and bullish that, we're getting places. I think that the often now mentioned stablecoin example is given as a great example of where there has been product market fit for not only regulators allowing it for whatever reason, and then also companies actually building stuff and people actually using it. Imagine that. That's crazy,
shocker.
Right?
It's apart from degens.
So that was how we ended it, and there was a feeling that there's just tremendous momentum. And what a lot of people don't know about stablecoins is there's actually institutional use case for cash stablecoins, whether it's intercompany payments, whether it's settlement within trading systems. the repo market and TradFi is, billions of dollars are sent overnight. It's not happening yet with stable coins, but you can imagine it will. So yeah, two great conversations and two great panels.
Awesome. Kind of like zooming out, you gave us a little bit of a hint, an allusion to how you're perceiving regulatory uncertainty here in the States. It's a question I've been asking the majority of folks we spoke with at this conference. How do you view the regulatory ambiguity here? You kind of hinted that the elections may or may not matter, but really, like, I'm worried about the builders that are here in the States. They might not feel secure or safe enough to continue building here for the next year or two. So what's just your general perspective on where we're going in the US and how are regulations going to shake out?
Yeah, and I'm not sure you saw the news about Cumberland today. SEC petitioned them for some activity. It's not a good environment right now. Like, it's hard to say that it is. It is not a good environment in the US to build. And part of that is the lack of regulatory clarity. Part of it is this regulation by enforcement that seems to continue. It's, of course, very hard not to talk about this topic without getting political. I'll just say that, I think there's a few scenarios. So there's the scenario where Trump wins, and on the face of it, I think out of potential chaos may come either just hands off, let people do what they want, and that becomes clarity. There's the case where Harris wins, and if that's the case, I am cautiously optimistic that just because she wins doesn't mean that she keeps the policies of what had been this administration. And then I'll just close with one other observation that is maybe more realpolitik and maybe a little jaded. I have a fundamental question around DeFi, crypto, and power that I'm not sure how far we'll really be able to go, because it just seems so much in opposition to centralized government. Even the stablecoin thing, I think I can't imagine a world where 50% of our money supply is USDC. Like, I just don't see a government, Democrat or Republican, allowing this. So I think what's interesting about this is it kind of goes back to Satoshi in some ways, and it kind of goes back to some libertarian questions around the role of government, etc. So, and I think some of those interests, some of those institutions are so big, like the Fed, that an election on the face of it may not change it substantially. But then on the more optimistic end, I think if the crypto industry, and if we emerge and mature and realize where we can go and where we can't go, and we kind of come together and still get to do some cool stuff.
I love the multi-choice.
I sort of answered the question without answering. I should go into politics.
So kind of like zooming out, we're at Permissionless, we're at the end of day 2.
Yeah.
What is one major takeaway that you've had from being at this event and participating?
I think, nothing from this event specifically, because there's been so many great events that are a little bit of a blur between Singapore, New York last week, Salt Lake City. I think what I'm seeing here is the continued theme that I've saw in Singapore, and that is the maturity of the, not to sound paternalistic or condescending, the maturity of the DeFi industry we can't just do stuff without, working with people outside our ecosystem. And I think you see that on the panels here. I think you see that in the conversations, which is good. At the same time, still that great energy of builders, people who want to build new stuff. One of the things I love about this industry is how global it is. Here you have people from all over the world, same in Singapore. I think that's one of the wonderful things. One of the things I really enjoy about this space that I hope we can, bring to other industries across the globe.
Hadley, who do you want to speak with, and what's the best way they can reach out to you?
Anyone about, if you have any questions about staking on Solana, Marinade, if you have any disagreements, if you have any agreements, disagreements will go to your email. But you can follow me on Twitter. I'm not tremendously active because of my TradFi days, but I'm at Hadley Stern. And you can reach out to me at Marinade, Hadley@marinade.finance. And I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much, Hadley.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to catch any of the other interviews we've had here at Permissionless, head over to the Neo News Today YouTube channel.